it reminds me of Douglas Tatar, and he's a psychologist that I follow, whose work I really like. He'll be on the podcast eventually again soon. I think you'll appreciate it. But one of the things he talks about is the human process of growing up, and that we don't have to by any means. We can stay locked, but growing up is when we're open and show up to the world, and our beliefs or conceptions or whatever kind of grind up against reality in a way that it's like, oh, this isn't working. And so that grinding sort of forces us to expand the complexity of our understanding about things and about ourselves. And that's the growing up process, because as we grow up, we increase our neurological and cognitive capacity for complexity of understanding and in understanding ourselves and understanding the world. But that if we're locked into a particular way of seeing things, if we're locked into a particular way of being in the world, and we are isolated in that, and we're reinforced in that, there's zero reason for us to mature at all. And so when we're forced to interact with other people who come from different cultural values and differing ideas, and we kind of grind up against each other. I mean, like, I just thought about like 1990s, like in the club, but like when we grind up against each other, you know, there's a forcing, if we're all really in it, to like, oh, what's up? Then we're forced to sort of grow up and consider things differently. But when we isolate, we're not. Like, there's no reason. In fact, it's against our advantage to think about things differently than our group, because then we're less likely to be included by our group. We're less likely to feel comfortable around our group, right? And so in Canada, we have a cultural situation, especially where I live, there are very few venues to go to. There's almost no, like, venues are just dying away, like venues for recreation. And so in the city I'm in, there's very few places where you could just go, where you know other people are going to be around and you hang out and chat. There's cafes and stuff, but for the most part, those have become mobile offices for millennials on MacBooks, which is fine. I am one of them, right? But it takes away this thing. And the cannabis culture here, there are no smoking lounge spaces. I mean, there are some maybe coming in. There's some in Vancouver, right? But for the most part, it's like you can buy your cannabis, you buy it online. In Ontario, you buy it online, it ships to your house, and you can smoke it in your house and only in your house. You can smoke it in other places, but there's all these different sort of like confines around it. So it's like, it's very much like forcing isolation in consumption in a way that, say, a bar doesn't. Mind you, alcohol is a whole different kind of world that doesn't necessarily produce the positive benefits that you're talking about here. So when I heard your talk at Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, and you talked about how valuable and nourishing it was to like smoke in community, it really showed me how much I don't have that as something that's culturally available to me, and how sad that is. And I thought there was a question coming, but I just had a commentary on what you said. But I think it is really quite important to consider like the cultural context, the communal context in which we consume something like cannabis, because there is, like you said, like there's an extreme value present to being in groups of people who you kind of know, kind of don't know, but you all have this commonality of consuming the cannabis, and then also the psychoactive effects of the cannabis and how it changes your sociability and the way you like make sense of things and stuff, and the opportunity to really to grow up is beautiful, and it's not necessarily available to people even where I live, where it's legal to consume.
I want to just thank you right there, because you just gave me so much to think about. Just this idea of the growing up and the grinding, and it's 100. I mean, my mind is blown, and my mind is blown. I do want to say that I feel that there is a negative impact, especially someone who's been through it, there's a negative impact in requiring people to be by themselves with cannabis, especially with flower as opposed to hash. Because one of the things about flower and just cannabis allows your mind to go places, but without context. There's a reason why they say the idle mind is the devil's playground. You know, without context, cannabis can allow something to be magnified, and we can get obsessive about that thing and then color the rest of our world while we're in a very impressionable state based on that. And continued cannabis consumption by oneself, I just don't see that without it being an intentional, I'm trying to have this cleanse and be by myself, but where you're forced to not interact. So it's almost like we are opening all the floodgates of receptors, but nothing's coming in and
Mm.
nothing gets to go out. That's terrible. I think I know that exacerbated my depression and my isolation. And the one thing that got me out of it is when I took the mushrooms. At that time, that was I think 2.83 grams. I took the mushrooms and I saw from a third person's perspective, oh wow, you're really isolated and really, really lonely. And it hit me super hard because at the time I had 20 something thousand followers and whatever, but I'm by myself smoking in my house and I am super, super lonely. And that's what made me go out and say, I'm going to invite people into my space, and I'm going to, even better, just go into their space, be willing to be uncomfortable. I think cannabis does a very good job of putting the lube in the uncomfortable part to then, like, look, it's not so bad. Oh, look, it's not so bad. Look, I did open and expand my box and I can handle more. And I think that idea of not having to grind up against reality I think that's super telling. I think that is super telling. And I'm sorry about your situation that you have in Canada, especially how big Canada is. I can only just imagine just all these souls just separated at their house, and you don't even interact with the bud tender or have that moment of, oh, we really like this flower, and talking about it. There's something so very personal about it being online, And by the way, I hope mushrooms never get to that, or any other kind of psychedelics. I feel that would be truly heartbreaking. But I know that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, there is it's a different situation, I think, with psychedelics, because it's a lot less easy to consume alone and it be mostly fine most of the time with psychedelics, because it opens up a different part of the mind that isn't necessarily so peaceful and dissociative. Like cannabis really can be a great way to completely check out, like check out to the point where it's like, yeah, you didn't feel isolated because you were high, but then the mushrooms were like, hey, PS, you're isolated and you're lonely and you're using cannabis to hide from that, and it's like
100%. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. It was like, oh, I'm so lonely. Oh gosh. But it changed my life. So I'm very thankful for it. And it hurt so bad, but it changed my life.
That's what it is, like back into the Tataran stuff. It's like, yeah, well, if we don't feel those feelings, they're never going to finish.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, that's my conception of his work. But anyways, let's draw to a close here.
Okay.